if you guys remember, last year in July, we had a press conference to announce that we were launching a special voter campaign around Korean Americans, and we called it the 10,000 Korean Votes campaign, or 한인유권자 만냥 모기.
Yes.
Woo! I actually read that. So we started that in July. And I want to say, we kind of realized as we got media coverage that we weren't really clear at the outset what our goals were. So I wanted to start this press conference by really outlining what our goals are. So the 10,000 Korean Votes campaign is a multi-year campaign. It wasn't just for last year. It was just kind of like, we want to target Koreans year in, year out. And we decided our goal is 2020. Which is the next presidential election. That's also when census happens, the decennial census. But our big goal is to turn out 10,000 Korean American voters in Georgia, no later than 2020, meaning 10,000 Koreans in Georgia going out to vote at the same time, one election. So how do we get there? We're gonna continue year after year increasing the number of Korean Americans that are registered to vote. We're going to increase the number of Korean Americans going out to vote. 안녕하세요. And we just started. And one way we're going to track this is to compare voter turnout, from one election to a comparable election. And I'll talk a little bit about that. Also, a lot of what we do, and we do it together with Pro Georgia, is selectively target certain areas. We're not just talking about whole state. Of course, we want everybody in the state to vote, but we'll selectively target certain cities or certain districts, right, to do really intense work, to really shift elections in that particular area. So that's another way to show power. Also, through our campaign trainings, we want to increase the number of Korean Americans seeking office. Right? We want to build power through leadership. And finally, we really believe one of the main ways that we can significantly increase the number of Koreans participating through voting is by having Korean language ballots. We've been speaking with Gwinnett County, as well as the U.S. Department of Justice, as well as the U.S. Census Bureau since early last year, trying to understand both the legal as well as more grassroots organizing advocacy ways that we can get the ballots, at least in Gwinnett County, translated formally into the Korean language. I'll tell you one of the best ways, and this is really the reason why I thought this would be a good campaign, the best way to get it to happen is to show the political power of Koreans in Gwinnett. If more Korean Americans vote in Gwinnett and start asking for it, that's going to be the best way to get the ballots translated into the Korean language. So that to me is a really big policy goal, which is linked to our campaign. So what did we do? Just to let you know, what did we do last year once we started? The first thing was we had this press conference. We unveiled our infographic. This is written in Korean. I'll show you a couple in English. We ran 70 voter registration drives, not just for Koreans, but for all people, Koreans included. We did door-to-door canvassing and phone calls in Again, we targeted certain 동네s or neighborhoods and did door-to-door canvassing, which is just one door, calling Koreans and other voters. We printed a weekly ad campaign. Many of you guys know about our weekly ad campaign. Published a different educational ad on the importance of voting for Korean Americans, and we printed it in 3 different Korean newspapers every week for 13 weeks, something different every week. We sent a mailer to Korean 목사님s or pastors, asking them to put it in their chubol or their announcements to allow us to do registration drives at their churches, to speak about the importance of voting there. Korean Television Network, one of our media partners, 안녕하세요, also produced and aired a very short PSA, a public service announcement. We produced a how to vote at the polls 90-second public service. It actually, I'll show it to you later. For people that have never gone to vote before, showing them what the machine looks like, what the forms look like. We dubbed it in Korean. It was aired on Korean television network multiple times for a month. We also did a billboard right behind Sorabul restaurant, right at Steve Reynolds in Pleasant Hill, 1 month before the elections. And then the thing that I'm most proud of, and I have a copy if you guys pass this out, right before, probably 2 weeks before the actual election last year, so people got it like a week or 2 weeks before the actual election, we mailed anywhere from 5,000, 8,000 Korean American voters. We sent them a letter in Korean and English, that's the letter, asking them to please go out and vote. So you have a copy of both how it actually came out, in Korean on one side, the letter in English in the other, and then a second sheet for how they can get involved, again in Korean and English. So we did all of that last year. Just to show you, this is the infographic in English. So you can see this is based on our research and data from the American Community Survey or Census. At that point in 2013, we had estimated about 4,600 Koreans are registered to vote, but there's more than double that number of Korean Americans that should be eligible to vote in Gwinnett County. So you can see less than half of Koreans that could vote or could register to vote are actually registered in Gwinnett, right? More than 50% of Koreans in Gwinnett said they speak English less than very well. This is why the 안녕하세요, the ballots being translated into Korean is so important for us. These are just some pictures. Let me turn off the lights. These are some pictures of several of our Korean American students from Emory and UGA. You know, just pictures of voter registration drives at H Mart, at ASI, at different places, just so, you know, kind of to show what we did. This is an example of one of the advertisements that we published. We have all of them on our website, by the way, if you want to actually look back at the ads. I'd like to invite Paige Gleason, she's the executive director, she said, of Pro Georgia. Pro Georgia is our state table. The table is basically like a coalition of, I think, currently 12 of the leading nonprofits, including us, that do this kind of work. And Paige leads that coalition for us and helps us coordinate. You know, like if we're doing voter registration one place, then she'll coordinate so that we're doing it together with other groups. But here, let me put the slide and then you can talk about it, Paige. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, one of our goals is to really enhance and strengthen the work of our partner organizations so that they can be even more effective in engaging in as many people as possible in voting and being educated voters. So we're really proud of the work that Asian Americans Advancing Justice has done over the past few years. And one of the things that I think is interesting, as we talk about findings and results, and as we talk about what Asian Americans Advancing Justice did in 2014, I'll just start with a little snippet and then I'll get into this stuff. And that is, surprisingly, because we had sort of like exciting elections, overall voter turnout in Georgia was down in 2014 as opposed to, when compared to 2010, except for two groups, and that was Latinos and Asians. Those are the only two groups that increased their voter participation in 2014 as compared to 2010, and I think that's directly a result of the work done by organizations who are really carefully engaging these communities in ways that are meaningful to them. So I just wanted to put this in context as we talk about what happened in Georgia and what the potential for the Korean vote and the overall Asian vote is in the state. So right now, well, first I'll start off by saying all of these are estimates. Our database uses a combination of census data, consumer data, and Secretary of State election results. And so the numbers that I'm giving you here are likely lower than the real numbers of Koreans both eligible, registered, and turning out. This is just the best we can do because the Secretariat, nobody actually tracks by Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, which would be really helpful for us as we do this really culturally sensitive, deep voter engagement work in these communities. So, that being said, but based on our estimates, there are about 12,000 registered Koreans throughout the state of Georgia. Of those, just over 2,400, or 20%, voted in the 2014 election, which is actually, like I said, an increase over how Koreans have performed in previous years. So this shows the kind of forward progression, the progress that we really want to see in creating a more equitable state. And in Gwinnett County, our estimates are that there are just over 6,500 registered Koreans, of which nearly 1,300 voted. And again, that's about a 20% turnout, which compared to historically is really good, and was an increase whereas other groups went down. Does that make sense? So that's just a little bit of context of what's happening here, and then to put in the work that I believe Helen will talk about what they directly did in 2014. So I'm happy to help or answer questions around that. But there's some context for you.
Thank you, Paige. Certain, like, they call them matches. They'll do the best that they can, like, oh, certain last names, we think probably 80% with people last name Kim are Korean.
Right.
So this is what we mean by, we're not 100% sure, but this is about the best estimate, since our government does not provide it directly to us.
And we also think there's low. So what you see here is sort of the baseline, and we think there's actually more, and we're working on getting more accurate information all the time. But just to be clear, so.
And you were saying other groups were down, so if the turnout, well, I don't know if you were talking about turnout for Asians as a group, or?
Well, Asian Americans overall increased. I can pull up the numbers, but overall turnout was down. Koreans and Asians, and Latinos were up. So we assume, especially since Koreans are such a large part of the Asian population in Georgia, that we think that Korean turnout was also up.
Right.
Again, this stuff we're trying to get much more granular in what we do, but
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say.
But I think the work of Pro Georgia and some of this data is about as specific as anybody can get, is the bottom line. I mean, so nationally, 2014 midterm to 2010, overall across the nation, voter turnout went down. In our state, from 2014 to 2010, overall voter turnout went down. What Paige is saying, even among whites, blacks, Latinos, and Asians, I think white and black turnout in Georgia went down, but Latino and Asians went up. So that's a good thing. And again, we try to compare whatever the closest election was. So last year was midterms, so we compare it to 2010, because 2010 was the last midterm election, right, where we did the congressional races. So.
And comparing like to like is very important, because the people who turn out in presidential years, many more people turn out. So in order to have an accurate reflection of what progress is being made, it's important to compare in 4 years to 4 years.
Yeah.
So this year we're going back and comparing to 2012 as we move into 2016. Right, so, yeah.
So we helped individually and with all of our partners, we helped to register about 6,400 people last year. Most of them were in Gwinnett County. And this is an estimate. We estimate about 500 of those that we registered were Korean or are Korean, okay? And what this shows right here is basically a trend. I should have picked different colors, but typically when you look at the state and the counties, the number of registered voters go up during presidential years and down in midterm years. Basically, the reason is during the non-presidential election years, the Secretary of State will clean out the voter rolls and get rid of some voters. So you can see in every county, for presidential, the yellow, that's presidential, that it goes up. In the non-presidential years, it goes down. Do you see that? In Gwinnett, the actual number of registered voters in Gwinnett in 2014 went up, only by like 160. But it was higher than what it was in 2012. That is a huge change in a historic trend of going up, down, up, down. So it just shows how many people we're helping to register, how many people are registering to vote and how many people we are helping to register to vote. So that was a really surprising, result that we found at the end. Another thing in terms of turnout, and Paige talked about this, we estimated that the Asian American voter turnout increased by over 25% compared to 2010. Okay? Also, this letter that we sent, everybody that we sent a letter to, we put it in our voter database, and then we look back, how many of the people that got the letter actually voted? 74% of the Korean voters we mailed this letter to voted. Way higher than the overall 20% of Koreans in the state that voted. So that was huge for us. We realized, two things. Obviously, reaching out to our Korean community works. And I think reaching out to our Korean community, both in the Korean language as well as English language, it really helps. It really works. This year we're having elections in different cities. So we are targeting for the Korean American, 10,000 Korean votes, these three cities, Brookhaven, Duluth, and Johns Creek. And based on our voter database, Raymond, thank you, currently there's only 95 Korean voting population in Brookhaven, 561 Korean American voters in Duluth, and about 1,300 Korean American voters in Johns Creek. And one thing we want to do is we want to focus on Korean senior centers. We all know our beloved elders. They usually live and play and together in different centers. We've identified a senior center in Brookhaven and a senior center in Duluth. We want to go there. We want to help them to be registered. If need be, get them, help them fill out absentee ballot. We want to bus them. We're looking at renting vans or working together with Korean churches and taking the seniors in a van to early voting, to take them directly. Because in city elections, it really only takes like 100 votes to completely change who wins. I mean, the municipal elections is where Koreans can really show their power because it takes so few votes. So we thought to ourselves, okay, our seniors, they're the best. They all live together, so we can drive them over together, get them excited with us. And John Park, Brookhaven City Councilman John Park, first Korean American elected, city councilman, he has agreed to work with us. He'll be the celebrity Korean face going with us, because he's also handsome. And his dad is a pastor, so a lot of people know his family, so we're using him. He's agreed to be used, so I'm very happy about that. Also, what we always do, we're actually going into the neighborhoods of Johns Creek and Duluth. We're already doing it. Knocking on doors through the voter database, we've found who in the database that we believe are Asian, Koreans as well as Chinese, Vietnamese, Indian, who are already registered to vote and knocking on their doors to remind them there's an election this year. By the way, we know of 3 Asian Americans running in Johns Creek. 2 Indian and 1 Chinese American. There may be someone that's Korean American that may run in Duluth. He has not 100% said. I wish there's a Korean American running. I don't know of a Korean American who's announced. Do you guys know? The press would know. No?
Qualifies next week, right?
Yeah. Tim Her?
He's
No,
not going to.
Not this year. He may run next year. He ran last year for the state house. I don't think he's running this year. I try to convince him though. And then we're gonna increase, our goal is to increase overall Asian American turnout, but we also hope Korean American turnout in these 3 cities by at least 3%. And that's compared to the 2011 city elections, because again, that's the best comparison of a similar election in the city. I also want to thank the Overseas Korean Foundation. They have given us a grant this year specifically for our 10,000 Korean Votes campaign. And I mean, James, you can talk more about it, but I think it's a foundation funded by the South Korean government. Is that right?
I believe so. I don't know the exact details about the foundation itself, but
in Korean, they're called 재외동 보조단, and they're overseas Korean foundation. And through the Korean consulate in Atlanta, they contacted us. They knew about our 10,000 Korean Votes campaign, and we applied for their grant, which specifically focused on improving South Korean Americans' involvement in the politics and government. And one of the ways we thought we could work, especially for that grant, was our 10,000 Korean votes. And we submitted the application, and it went through about 2 weeks ago. And they have notified us, so we're getting a grant from them to do these kind of specific programs, to work with the Koreans to hopefully increase the voters as well as their engagement in the politics.
Yeah, it was really cool to hear that the South Korean government is just as interested in building political power for Korean Americans. It's not just, in Korea. So thank you. And James put that together because the grant was in Korean. I can't do it.
It was like a first year program. So this is first year they're giving this kind of grant to do this kind of specific civic engagement.
Right, in the
political.
States? Is it in the
Well,
States? Or
it's not just in the States. I think overseas, so it includes other continents and countries as well. But specifically for us, or for them, this is like a first year program where they're giving this money to different organizations to hopefully increase the political engagement for Koreans.
And I just want to say, it's not impossible, our goals. We worked in the city of Duluth in 2013 during the 2013 city elections. We increased voter turnout. You can see this is how many people that voted in 2009. This is how many that voted 4 years later. So we more than doubled the turnout in the city of Duluth. But this gives you a sense of how few people actually vote, okay, in city elections too. So again, I just can't stress enough, and I hope the Korean press will, and NPR, thank you. You count too? No, just how really, even more than the presidential elections, how important it is to vote, because that's where we can really flex our muscles and show that our community has, a lot of power and we're engaged. So I think that's it. And we're also thinking about replicating some of our field work in maybe kind of doing a small experiment, picking a precinct or an area in Alabama or South Carolina where Asians live, like taking our field work, working with a grassroots Asian organization there, and seeing how we might be able to help build their capacity up in another southern state. So other than those very broad things, we haven't determined like what's our number, what's our goal, but certainly for presidential elections, we always focus a lot on the number of people we help to register. This year, it's all about just how many people can we turn out, because not that many people, register to vote during off years. So with our limited time, we're just focusing on actually engaging mostly people that are already registered. But next year, we're gonna push out like registering voters.
And to build on that, and
Yeah.
because this all goes into sort of the overall municipal work, and the way that we're sort of, one of the ways that we're collectively looking at municipal elections is this idea of building a lifelong habit of voting. And
Yeah.
the idea is the more that you vote, the more that you value and understand why each different kind of election is important, the more likely you are to continue to vote. So I think this work in these municipals is critical, because if we can get somebody to vote this year in this really low interest city council race, which should be much higher interest but just isn't, their likelihood of coming out next year is
Yeah.
that much greater. So then then we can expand who we're talking to, and we can build on that impact from year to year. So I think this municipal work and helping people value municipal elections is really important to future growth.